but we'll be talking about the cost of all of this.
Yeah, and the fact that Prime Minister Sunak is in Ukraine today, in Kiev, pledging more money.
Is it 2 billion?
Ukraine.
2.5 billion.
2.5
200 million will go to providing British manufactured drones as well, hundreds of those that will be given to Ukraine. Drones are the watchword at the moment, isn't it? They're being used to such good effect, clearly, by both Russia and Ukraine. Yemen are doing that now and causing lots and lots of issues for commercial shipping, indeed, our naval vessels out in the Red Sea.
Well, are we doing the right thing financially and politically in all of this? Let's talk to defence analyst Chris Newton and former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. Chip Chapman, good to see you both this morning. Chip, what do you make of all of this?
Well, I think the attacks were probably inevitable after the defensive operations that they'd had under Operation Prosperity Guardian. The attacks by the Houthi, the complex attacks on the 9th of January, were the 27th strikes by the Houthis since 19th of November. You can only defend for so long. I think the key thing is keeping sea lanes open has always been a UK vital interest, and this is one of those challenges to the rules-based international order. Freedom of navigation is the bedrock of the global trade, and the Bab el-Mandeb is a choke point or vital artery which must be protected, along with the Strait of Hormuz and the Malaccan Strait, for example, down in Asia.
It seems such a big challenge, does it not, Chris Newton? I mean, is there any way we can do anything effective enough before we run out of money and troops?
Yeah, good morning. Yes, I mean, the whole kind of defence challenges are immense. In terms of the what we're doing in Yemen and the Houthis, I mean, we're talking about limited strikes here. We're not talking about getting involved in a major war. So we're talking about sort of limited strikes. I don't know how long the government wants to proceed with the operation, but that is, as you know, Tan, one part of a whole big defence picture, which includes Ukraine. And I would argue that both of these issues are important for British national interest.
I tell you what, particularly as we've got you on, Chip, in your previous role, we've been told retaliation. Well, look, it's one thing, bad enough as it would be to retaliate on ships in the area, but does this raise concern for what could happen back here at home?
Yeah, I think it always does. And having watched your programme this morning, people have said they don't know where Yemen is. I actually used to go to Yemen a lot. And President Hadi, who was the president until 2018, once told me that the Houthi he described as the Hezbollah of the north, they even had the same flag, that is, that their stronghold was in Saba. Now, there's always blowback, and you've seen people already from the very left of the spectrum try and say that, for example, sea lanes seem to be more important than people, i.e. that's linking it with the Gaza. And from the Houthi perspective, they tend to do that because the Houthis are part of this unity of fronts against Israel. From the Iranian perspective, it is part of the theatre of war from their perspective, part of this ring of fire. And there was a 1,000-mile ballistic missile earlier in the Israeli Gaza campaign fired by the Houthis towards Eilat in Israel, which is one of the major seaports. So there could be blowback. There could be, again, this sort of radicalization. There is a diaspora Yemeni community. There's a large Yemeni community, for example, in Cardiff. Some of those, for example, after the IS campaign, went to Syria. So there is always the potential of blowback. That is mitigated, of course, by the competence of your security forces.
And Chris Newton, what of Iran's role in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, Iran is pretty much, as far as we know, kind of directing and providing the intelligence for the Houthis. And given that Iran has not responded directly to Israel's operation in Gaza, and Hezbollah to the north has not got involved, this is Iran's, the Houthi attacks on Western shipping is kind of Iran's way of defiance of making its point and showing that Iran can still kind of act with its proxies militarily against what is happening. But what Iran does next is an interesting question. As I say, they couldn't respond directly in terms of Israel. They're pursuing this with the Houthis, and now that's invited a Western response, and they're also attacking in US bases in Iraq and Syria. So how do they escalate next? And do they escalate? What's their next move? We're not
Which
sure.
begs the question, Chip. As much as we've been trying to avoid or trying to influence the de-escalation in terms of a regional conflict, and Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State, been really trying very hard to do that over the last week, could this be a trigger to actually make things worse?
Well, there was a joint statement issued only about an hour ago which said that the aim was to de-escalate tensions and restore stability in the Red Sea. Now, you can escalate in 7 ways. You can escalate by weapons, objectives, targets, domains, geography, rhetoric, or mobilization. Now, I expect to see more rhetoric from the Iranians, and you've got to keep in context, of course, that both the Saudi Arabians and the UAE were involved and have been involved in a conflict against the Houthis since 2015 under a thing called Operation Decisive Storm, which has neither been decisive nor a storm. So the real problem here is this a single event, i.e. to restore deterrence, or is this start of a campaign? Now, they've said that the aim here is to disrupt and degrade the capability of the Houthis. It is not to absolutely destroy that. You try and go back to restoring deterrence. This is deterrence by punishment. But the key thing is, what if it doesn't work? Because one of the variables is you don't really ever know at the start of these sorts of operations what the power of resistance of the Houthis is. And Iran would potentially fight to the last Houthi. They won't fight to the first Iranian. Now, in 1988, under a thing called Operation Praying Mantis, the Americans actually destroyed 5 Iranian ships to restore deterrence and effectively end the mining of international waters in the Strait of Hormuz. There is potentially, if you really were going to escalate, 2 things. Firstly, the Americans could do that against the surveillance ship of the Iranians, which is in the Red Sea area, MV Beshad, and they've also got a frigate, the Al Borz. But secondly, the worst case from the Iranian perspective is they also have another grouping of one of their sort of proxy armies with the Polisario Front in Morocco. The worst case for them is that they've said that they would close the Strait of Gibraltar and therefore access to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, I don't think they have the capability to do that, but that would probably be seen as an act of war were that to take place.
So, sorry, just one last point.
Please.
When I was talking about attacks on the US bases in Iraq and Syria, I was talking about them Iranian-backed militia groups. I wasn't quite sure whether I made that clear, but it's the Iranian-backed militia groups that's doing that.